beautiful rock garden here at Ballandalloch Castle is where we will now find Fiona Gunn and her brother Neil, two very talented young musicians. They're going to play what they call their Braveheart theme set. The tunes are the Braveheart theme, Chief Israel and Rumley Bray.